we do this, we have 10 minutes. So what I propose to do is actually to invite you to ask questions. And there may be two or three questions. We stop there. And if you can address a question to a specific individual, I think that would be good. Go ahead.
My question is for Gary. Could you please tell us more about shared hospitality and what that means to you and in that dynamic?
Why don't we do this? Take more questions. If you don't mind joining down. Yeah, because the time is limited. Go ahead.
This is probably for either one of you, so I'll leave it up to you, but maybe to Gary. I had in the back of my mind a question about how the work of building relationships.
Your name, by the way, sir?
I'm Layla. Layla Roberts, yeah. How the work of rebuilding a nation, how the work of building relationships between cultures works when there is ongoing destruction of relationships and infrastructure simultaneously.
Okay.
And Romina, you mentioned how when you came back to Kabul in 2009, it was different than it was in 2006. And I just wondered if you could talk more about the chaotic environment there and how you're seeing all these foreigners coming in, they're driving all these expensive cars, yet you're seeing how obviously the resources aren't necessarily maybe being allocated to the people. That's the whole point that they're there to sort of collaborate with the locals. I just want to know if you could talk more about that and your opinions about that.
So let's take one more question.
I was curious if you could say more about how you as a faith-based organization interacts with people and some of the things you can do to safeguard any conflict that might arise between being a faith-based organization and working with people and not causing any harm in that process. Tony?
So that's good for
Brian.
Right. Okay, I think that's good for 10 minutes. Please go ahead.
2006 was, there's a description. 2006, you can walk in Kabul, you can go to take a coffee in the morning, grab a coffee, grab vegetables from the market. You're comfortable. Let's say I'm covered, everything is covered, surely, but you can do that. And you can have some of your friends just to go for coffee, just to go for shopping, and go around, see girls, see boys, see guys, Afghan. 2009, it was shocking. It was traffic jam in Kabul. And what is it that you say these military guys, big guys, American military uniforms. They're half of the traffic. They're just blocking the traffic with the civilians. I have no idea how they manage this, but the general idea, you have to just allow these military tanks, guys, to pass by simple school-going or simple cars. Traffic is terrible in Kabul. It's horrible in Kabul, and you literally miss all your meetings to get from point A to point B, where you can just walk 15 minutes. But what was shocking for me is the level of luxury, let's put it that way. You can find anything in Kabul, any product that you come to the West, except New England coffee you cannot find in Kabul, but you can find anything there. Name it, chicken, ice cream, vegetables, everything, but it's not accessible to Afghans. It's accessible to foreigners. Everything in downtown, all the foreigners are there. The cars belong to foreigners, foreign NGOs, big names on the foreign NGOs, UN, United Nations cars are bigger than, let's say, other military cars. They block all the roads. NGOs, small NGOs, children that go to school, I heard that they rent a car or a taxi. So they literally blocked into these traffics. And then women, you cannot walk on the street because it's not advisable for a woman to walk on the street, but you can drive. And what is also was at least personal shocking is a lot of helicopters are flying in Kabul. It's like all these cartoons. There's a lot of helicopters, trucks, noise, phones, and all of this is international NGOs that are packed, jammed in Kabul. They cannot go to the provinces, they cannot stay in the provinces because of the security. Every NGO brings them to Kabul. So it's just messy. You cannot get to any compounds checked. Your car is checked every 10 minutes. And the time that I arrived, there was a peace talk. Karzai initiated a peace talk. So it was like 2 days. Every taxi, every car gets checked. You get checked, your IDs. You have to make sure that you have IDs, justification when you're traveling. Everywhere you go through these checkpoints, you know, the noising airport check. So that's a lot to handle. And in my mind, I thought, what about children that are on the car? Because you know everybody has a weapon right now. And you know that everybody are on the edge. They're so stressed about it. So anywhere the conflict can happen, and then bombs on the road, you know it can happen, and you know in the car the children, the mothers, you're not protected. You don't even know where to run. That was the shock level. And it's a lot to do. Perhaps it's my very personal opinion. It's a lot to do. But international NGOs are just packed, jammed in Kabul. No coordination. They're just packed in Kabul. Some perhaps were famous, being famous, to say, oh, we work in Afghanistan. They're just there. They don't want to leave. Some are just there. You don't know what it is.
You're saying you don't really know what they're doing there? Is that what
There's a lot of questions about it. A lot of questions are asking now what NGOs are doing.
So we need to end on time, so briefly on each of the three questions.
And I would quite willing to follow up if you guys want to in these questions. So a couple sentences in each one. Hospitality. Hospitality is a kind of a formal, safe place to study each other, and I think it's really, really important. I think I wish I did it more. It gives them a chance. It's sort of a safe vulnerability when you are being hosted by somebody. It's a chance for them to sort of figure out who are you, yeah. There's one angle on this that I find interesting, and I try to look at people in different parts of the world, including the U.S. You can kind of figure people out in both directions. There are people I know who've got the heart. They have the magic. They know how to do hospitality. It's something that comes from within, and it's a way that you posture your stuff and your space. You make it available to other people. Even in Afghanistan, where everyone is supposed to be ready to do that, the culture, I like it in the sense that it's like they have got all the conventions in place where you're supposed to be hospitable. Even so, you can tell the people who are doing it from the heart and those who aren't. Yeah, and I also, this is a little bit moralistic or whatever, but I'll also say that I had a kind of a moment of sort of testing where I talk, about I'm studying hospitality from the Afghans, and I talk it, and I as if I mean it. I think I mean it. So I once had an older gentleman who wanted to visit us. He kind of showed up out of the blue from England, and he decided I need to stay somewhere for a week. And it took me 3 days to get to a point where I got around to saying, okay, you can stay with us. And I had such an internal struggle. And I finally caught myself. I said, what is it that I preach all the time? What do I say? What would an Afghan do in this situation? Afghan would comport their life around this guest who's so very, very important. For me, as a typical American, they're kind of a hassle. I don't have time for this. So I had to kind of really, really just stop myself and say, it would be an honor for me, and it really would be, for me to stop and allow this thing to happen. So this is an example of how I've learned. We can talk more. The issue of building when there's destruction going around, so part of the answer is you can't. I feel like one of the reasons why the large industrial, collective, politicized effort that we're doing there is not as successful as it could be, is because of some of the lack of coordination, which I think is partly a problem. There are some good examples. But I think that when destruction is going on, absolutely, it's hard to pretend that you're trying to help when you're also hurting at the same time. And I think we undermine our effort, like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 3 forward, 2 back, whatever. So on one level, yeah, the verdict is, I think it's not good. You can't. On the other hand, Afghans tend to know how to be selective in their judgments and their perceptions of things. Most Afghans don't think along this sort of rubric that we're trying to put in there, which is like you're a nation, you're a people, because really for most Afghans, I'm a Tajik, I'm an Uzbek, or I'm part of this family. And if they perceive that if their experience with you or your group is relatively positive and it's horrible for one of their neighbors, they'll still think, what can I get out of this? So there's a way in which you can kind of, sort of the tribalism in a weird way can work. And I guess finally the last part I would say about that is that I haven't totally given up on a big scale, but my confidence in it has diminished dramatically. I don't have a whole lot of hope in how we're doing things on a big scale. One of the reasons I decided to move away from the State Department and the typical model of big donor cycles and the games you play and stuff to get this stuff is that I thought I would rather do this seeking out, busting my butt to get private donors and to make this much more organic. Because for one thing, I can think of, like the average Afghan or human being can think of locally a lot more easily than you can on a large scale. And my feeling is that even if things fail on a large scale, I'm both, I guess in the mystical faith way, but also I think in terms of what's reasonable, believe that small scale efforts, you can imagine, you can see how they'll survive bad times ahead. Seeds will get planted. Maybe the ground gets burnt over there in the coming months and years, but I think that those seeds will come up. So I find that small-scale local investment, it's easier to see how it can work despite some of the failures around. So, and then, quick.
Yeah, very quick. We also have not to forget that these people are vulnerable. They're going through a lot of, I don't want to name it like trauma, or they're going through a lot of loss. They're going through a lot of internal difficulties. And then one of the way, in my experience, when I would listen to them, simply give it time to listen, because a lot of women do not have the chance to talk. Husband is not listening, mother-in-law is not listening, children are not listening. So talking to me, I felt such a relief for them. It's immediate, like they would come with a very sad, heavy burden, and after 2 hours they feel peaceful. They like to have more tea, they like to talk, and they come to office especially to talk. That's the only place that they can talk. Sometimes I am emotional, and to feel like how lucky, especially I am, or how lucky my friends are in States, like how lucky we are here, how lucky at least, Tajikistan is. So I become emotional. I get more emotional than they are, and then they say, don't worry, we're used to it. And I cry because it's too much. It's just too much, and it's unfair. But then, to the question, these little small things, I think it brings a lot of confidence in them, so they can show to the daughters or they can show to their son. At least out of that, one day is something. So that's how I look at it, is like at least something to each individual of them makes a difference. They talk at least, And then you also tell them you're going through the same difficulties.
Lena, I have one or two more thoughts after, if you're rushing away. Yeah, I'll answer Tony so we can wrap it up, but I'll have a few more thoughts after we break. Tony, the challenges. Here's a few kind of anecdotes. I recommend.
Limited to one anecdote and have the rest of the conversation later.
Oh, okay.
Just so that time is fine. Yeah. You can talk afterwards.
Okay.
Just share one anecdote. Yeah.
Okay. So I can relate Muslims, for me, this is a gross generalization, this is kind of a caricature, but it's still meaningful. Muslims, for me, are on the one hand, they are kind of competitors in sort of the whole epic scope of religious conflict, right? As a Christian, we have a set of issues with Muslims, and they with me, about our beliefs and how we've dealt with each other over history. It's a reality, it's a history that we share. A lot of it's bad. And they have a lot of fears and concerns which I try to understand and learn. And so when I deal with Muslims, I'm dealing with a lot of baggage that I have and that they have. And that can be potentially problematic. On the other hand, I can relate to Muslims, and that kind of baggage is something that my kind of, let's say, European, Western, international people, I can kind of take a break from that kind of that intensity, and I can relate to my international friends and retreat from a little circle of people who can understand who each other are. On the other hand, to contrast that, for me and for typical Afghan Muslim villagers, there are certain realities that are intimately intertwined with things like development and peace and things like prayer, mercy of God. We can relate to each other on that level. These are like actual realities that we share and that we can concur on and we talk about. That figures into our lingo and into our experience. And so in that sense, it really interests them because they will sometimes, Afghans will legitimately complain sometimes, worried about evangelistic efforts going on, proselytizing efforts going on among some Western Christians. And say that this is a threat to us. But they'll also, and they may say that to some other Westerners. Then they can also, at the same time, tell me as a person of faith, talk about their interested in things like virtue and spirituality and how's your relationship with God, what's it like, they want to, we can talk about it. Whereas they'll look at some of my Western colleagues and say, oh, these guys, they don't understand, So I can find myself shifting into different modes where there's potential for cooperation and empathy, and you can build on that, you can work with that. There's also the potential for conflict. And I guess, finally, on the big picture, I try, however well I think of myself and the best practices and the things that I'm trying to be careful about, I recognize I'm part of a community with a history. I'm actually kind of more of an Orthodox evangelical type Christian, and that puts me in a kind of a tense place with my Afghan partners and friends. I have to be very aware of how they see me and see what could be some issues with me. And I have to be aware too of the ways in which we've screwed up in history and some of the problems and sometimes we just aren't seeing things. There's so much to say. Thank you for your patience.
So why don't we give them a big hand and thank you very much.